oranges, squeeze me through, all that sort of thing. I have just been told to tell you that if for any reason you need to leave, to head towards your derriere. The rear exit is the place you would go to, though heaven forfend any of you will want to leave. I've also been told to tell you to switch off your devices. Well, I have no idea what your devices are. I only know what your vices are, and the last thing I want you to do is switch off any of them. But enough of all this, flaunting me fruit, showing me paps. For the last 350 years I've been wandering through your imaginations and your historical fantasticals as little more than a seller of oranges and a flaunter of my food. But there's and occasionally somebody will also remember I was the good King of England, Charlie II. That's Charles II to you, madam. I was his #1 footer. Hard my pal Mal lives a wench named Nell. King Charlie II, he kept her. She hath a trick to handle his prick. Oh! But she'll never lay hands on his sceptre. Fowler, foldy-woldo, you got to be quick when you handle a prick. Oh, well, foldy-woldo, she'll never lay hands on his sceptre. Yeah, well, there's a darn sight more to me than that, I can tell you. I'm sure there's a darn sight more to you, sir, than meets the eye. But it is thanks to His Royal Majestical King Charles II, Old Rowley, as I like to call him, on account of his most prolific stallion. Well, I don't know what you're laughing at, I'm talking about his racehorse. It is thanks to him that I'm here on a stage to tell you me tale in the first place. Let's venture back some 300 and more years to deepest, darkest, dankest England. For 18 years, 18 long and miserable years, our merry old land had been bereft of plays, of liquor, of life, since that mean old Baldrick Oliver Cromwell reformed us all and wiped the smiles off our faces. And now nothing nice was normal. No singing, no dancing, no music, no prancing, no running or leaping or unnecessary walking, whatever that might mean. And certainly no wrestling, and certainly not in the bedchamber. In fact, any bedtime carousing with anyone but you legally be wedded was a capital offence. Yes, indeed, it wasn't just your maiden head you'd lose. And as for the theatre, a public menace. Naught but rogues and vagabonds. Anyone found acting will be publicly whipped, and anyone found watching plays will be fined 5 shillings, which means I'd be flayed right now and you'd all be broke. We stood a bit of a chance once Oliver Cromwell died. I'd just come to London, 9 years old and eyes like saucers. Meet me mum and me sister Rose. London. The streets weren't paved with gold. Rats ran the street and piss ran the street, and few of us wore shoes. Mind your feet, Rose. On a hot summer day we could barely take a breath. And the streets weren't the only thing that stank. Rumour hath Samuel Pepys took 1 bath in 10 years. Talk about ripe. Ripe indeed was the time for old Rowley, who had been raggadying around Europe with scarce a penny to his name, to return from his French fiesta. Can you imagine the delight when back he came to England on May the 27th, 1660? I can remember because it was his 30th birthday. Not much I don't remember about our royal king. And what a party we had! We were dancing in the streets, we were wrestling and prancing and indulging in all manner of unnecessary walking. And what life our king restored to our land! Up half the night at a ball he was, and then arising at dawn like a regular chanticleer. That's a cock. A rooster. Oh yes indeed, that 2 yards a king was a handsome devil, with his long black curls and his sharp twinkling eyes. He loved sailing and fishing and gambling and science and theatre. Never before had a monarch so patronised the theatre. The beau monde was in ecstasies when on May the 7th, 1663, the King's Playhouse opened. Oh, oranges. Oranges, come and buy me lovely oranges. Why, kind sir, that'll be sixpence for my small sweet Chinas. Oh, what's that, kind sir? A message to Mrs. Davis? She's in the tiring house right now, waiting her entrance as Lady Squeezewell. For twopence more, I can hurry her entrance. Or is it yonder vizard on the further row? Why, of course, kind sir, if you buy my small sweet Chinas. My first real employment. Orange wench at the King's Playhouse. But I had a dream. King Charles II loved women. Oh, yes, indeed. To touch and to look upon. And he especially loved women on the stage. Beg pardon, Mrs. Gwynne, women on the stage. Did England ever hear of such a thing? Not upon your Puritanism, Nelly. Well, when Charlie came back from his enforced sojourn in gay Paris, where he had espied more than a few mamsells strut their hour, both on stage and off, if you comprenez-vous my meaning, and lo, the world changed. We do likewise permit and give leave that all women's parts may be henceforth performed by women, so long as these recreations be not scandalous or offensive, but be esteemed not only as harmless delights, but useful and instructive representations of human life, blah, blah, blah. These by the patents of the second Charles, most glorious King of England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, and my right, Royal Cunny and Scott. Be not scandalous or offensive. Who's he trying to kid? Got a few lovely pairs of thighs and calves in the public gaze, and you think old John Thomas won't find every featuring opportunity to make sure it is scandalous and useful and instructive. But cunningly done, my good people, cunningly done. Take the breeches part. You know, women in the role of men. Pretty little Alice, pinched into a doublet, clinched into a hose, a little bit of rump and a little bit of rose. Oh, Rose. But we didn't have many choices as a woman. Wife, servant, actress, board, or orange wench. And I didn't want to end up like my sister Rose, slung into the debtor's prison. And I watched those actresses as they flashed their calves, and I knew that being an orange wench could lead to being an actress. Being an actress could lead to being a gallant's mistress. And being a gallant mistress could lead to you not being on your beam ends for the rest of your God-given natural. You had to be strategic. You had to be entrepreneurial. You could say we were a new kind of woman. A new kind of woman dressed up as a man. And it just so happens to be my forte, comedienne extraordinaire. But don't just take my word for it. Mr. Samuel Pepys, the doyen of the diary, what does he have to say? To the King's house to see a new play by John Dryden, and there is a comical role done by Nell that I can never hope to see the like again, by man or woman. So great a performance in a comical role was never in the world, I believe, as Nell do this, especially when she comes in like a young gallant. The motions and carriage of a spark, the most I ever saw any man ever have. I must admit, I most admire her. Oh, yes, indeed. I was most admired as a spark. Faith, methinks you are a very jaunty fellow. Poudre et ajusté, as well as the best of them. I can manage the little comb, set my hat, shake my garniture, toss about my empty noddle, walk a courant slur, and at every step peck down my head. If I should be mistaken for a courtier now, pray, where's the difference? What is it that from you I want? 'Tis quintessentially your I cannot say that word. That is too scandalous and offensive for our dear sweet ladies. Though many's the time I've seen ladies hide their pretty little faces behind their vizards to disguise their smiles as much as their blushes. Oh yes, how they wish they were up here too, dabbling in a bit of harmless delight. Not that the theatre was a steamy bedroom, oh no. Our Restoration Playhouse was a place of sophistication, and actresses were stars. Suddenly it was ours. Independence, the chance of a professional career as an artist. And I'm not just talking about acting. Take my dear friend, Mrs. Afra Ben. Now there's an independent. A spy she was, yes, Lord love you, for the English government in Holland, no less. And she was a good friend to me. She was the first woman in the English theatre to put bread on the table by writing plays. Now that's impressive. Me, I couldn't even write my own name. She even dedicated plays to me, I'd have you know. Ah, yes indeed. We were two of England's first professional female artists. And we both died without husbands. Now, there's something to contemplate. Our buxom wenches a cuddle something for a soldier, a sailor, a beggar, man or king, with the smile of a maid for a lovelorn lad. He beggar, man or king, makes his heart right glad, with a bully whack a gilly whack a low. He's a kiss in the dark for a lad I'd know. I loved acting. I loved the singing and the dancing, the wisdom and the wit. Though, of one thing you should be clear, I was not one of your average actresses, looked upon as women of the worst possible character. Fair game to any man who came backstage to the Tyrant House to watch us dress. For 'tis as hard a matter for a pretty woman to keep herself honest in the theatre as 'tis for an apothecary to keep his treacle from the flies in hot weather. For every libertine in the audience will be buzzing around her honey pot. You know, some playwrights even encouraged us to behave like prostitutes to make their plays more popular. Poor Beck Marshall was chased home by a hired ruffian for not sharing her wares with Sir Hugh Middleton. Shit flying in her face and in her hair. Not me, Lord love you, no. Despite all the bribes and all the promises, I only had 3 true lovers in my entire life. It's true, cross me heart and hope to die. And they was all called Charlie. Charlie Hart was my first. Hart by name, heart by nature. The finest actor-manager in the King's Company. Made me what I was really, 14 years of age and working as an orange wench, and Charlie Hart picked me up from the pit, or should I say the pith, and put me on the stage. Yeah, it was Charlie Hart who elevated me. And you certainly needed some elevation, because the theatre could be dangerous. Take Billy Mountford, a rising star in the Theatre Royal, and he often played Annie Bracegirdle's lover on the stage. Stabbed to death by Captain Richard Hill. Why? Because Captain Hill adored Annie Bracegirdle and he couldn't bear to watch her making out with Mountford on the stage. Couldn't he tell the difference between acting and life? Clearly not. Charlie Hart. They say he was the great nephew of Will Shakespeare. And it could be true because what an actor. Taught me everything I know. We did The Chances, Secret Love, The Great Favourite. Oh, and we were the great favourites. Me, I couldn't read for a toffee, so outside the Cat and Fiddle Tavern, him and John Lacey would read me parts out loud to me and I'd learn them by rote. They taught me how to pout and to languish, to half invite and half repel a seducer, to swirl me skirts to arouse just enough thigh to arouse an appetite for more. 10 shillings a week I earned at first. That was the price of a nice pair of boots. Before too long I was on 30 shillings a week. That was the price of a nice pair of silk stockings. And within 6 months I was a household name, and jewellery and dresses were begifted upon me by many a fine gent. On the subject of which, there was something of an entr'acte in my professional career. She is pretty and she knows it, she is witty and she shows it, and besides it she's so pretty and so little and so witty, she's 100 other parts with which to take and conquer hearts. It was in one of our hits as the merry duo that my next Charlie Buckhurst, Lord as was, spotted me. Yeah, that's right, it was the mad couple. And I was playing hard to get on stage, that is, when Charlie Buckhurst fell head over heels, bought me off Charlie H, and whisked me away to Epsom to keep a very merry house. A right royal sparking around was Charlie Buckhurst. He once got so bemuzzled, it's this bloody guitar strap's really playing me up tonight. He once got so bemuzzled at the Cock Inn in Covent Garden that him and Sir Charles Sedley, Little Sid they called him, pranced out onto the balcony stark naked. And Charlie B preached an obscene sermon at the top of his voice while Little Sid piddled on the passing populace and pelted them with bottles. And these were the lords of the realm, and this was the man that wooed me. And yet when Charlie Buckhurst found that I wasn't so hard to get off stage, in fact when I fell head over heels in love with him, he left me. Yes indeed, after 3 months in a strange little menage a trois with Little Sid in Epsom, he left me with nothing more than an empty purse and a pound of a potion to cure syphilis. It's all a bit of an irony, really. Charlie Buckhurst wanted me to be available, well, after all, I was an actress, yet at the same time he wanted me to be what he'd seen on stage, a minx playing hard to get. Truth to tell, I was born under Venus. I fall in love. That's the funny thing. Every Tom, Dick and Charlie thinks you're the same off stage as on stage. They want you to be in real life like whatever they see on the stage. Well, it's not that I'm that different, but you'd think they'd at least pretend to love you for who you are, wouldn't they? So back I went from Epsom to London, where Grub Street made me the filthy talk of the town. To Buckhurst thus resigned in friendly wise, he takes a swinge and sometimes lends her thighs. To bestial Buckingham's transcendent prick, and sometimes witty Rochester, sometimes witty Rochester, sometimes witty Rochester would take a lick. Ah, it wasn't true, it wasn't fair, it was just scurrilous. I never had appetite for lechery or promiscuity. No, that return to London was not a good time. Not a good time for anyone. As if life in London wasn't hard enough. There came the Great Plague. People dying like animals in the ditches and the gutters, writhing with great pustulating swellings that broke open through their skin and oozed thick with white and red. We knew that it was coming, the Great Plague. We'd seen a comet in the night sky at the end of '64, white and pale, like the pallor of those dying. London emptied. Me and my mum went to Oxford. Weeds grew tall where the carriages once trammelled. Only the sick were stuck inside their homes, sealed up to die with red crosses on their doors. A ring of roses, a pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. And then just as we'd beaten the plague and returned to London, there came the Great Fire. We'd seen another comet in the night sky, this time like a flaming sword, and sure enough, a spark from a baker's oven in Pudding Lane, and the city started to burn. And the air wasn't just thick with smoke, you should have heard the noise. Women shrieking, kiddies screaming, birds falling from the skies as they roasted on the wing. Molten lead poured off the roof of St. Paul's Cathedral. Windows wept glass. Houses toppled like haystacks. The world was ablaze and the air was like thunder. King Charles himself went down to the city to help put out the fires with buckets of water, but it didn't do much good. London's burning, fetch the engines, fire, 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 pour on water. And yet somehow, me mum and me sister Rose, we survived. And where was the one place I could escape to and drown me sorrows? Why, the theatre! And before long I was back on the stage playing role after role opposite me old flame Charlie Hart. And by the summer of '68, at just 18 years of age, I was the darling strumpet of the crowds. And then my life took a right royal turn. Those who have her in her arms say she's 100 other charms, and she's many more attractions in her words and in her actions. But for that suffice to tell you, just the charming pretty Nellie. It was John Dryden's hit, Secret Love, and I was playing Florimel, a sparkish imp of mischief, opposite Charlie Hart. And it was the proviso scene, where for the first time ever, a woman determines the prenuptials. Now, fathom that one, if you dare. When we begin to live like husband and wife, our only happiness is to have one mind. One mind, but prithee let us have two wills, for I find one will be little enough for me alone. One thing let us be sure to agree upon, and that is never to be jealous. When you have been at play, I shall never inquire how much money you have lost. When I have been abroad, you shall never inquire who treated me. Whatever liberties we take with other people, we continue very honest with one another. And whereas the names of husband and wife hold forth nothing but clashing and cloying, we shall be married by the more agreeable names of mistress and gallant. I might as well have been talking to the king himself, because he saw me that night. And after a little bit of plotting on both sides of the footlights, a few weeks later, I found myself seated next to His Majesty the King in his box at the Playhouse. Oh, it was George Etheridge's She Would If She Could. Could I? Would I? Well, after the performance, we retired to a tavern where we regaled ourselves jauntily over some wine. And after the second bottle, the king inquired if I understood the meaning of his gallantries. And I could, because I should. Trouble was, when it came time to pay the reckoning, he had no money on him. Odds codfish, Nellie, we kings carry no cash. Oh, what poor company is this, says I. And I end up paying. Yeah, it was a good job I was a working woman. Yes, indeed. Before I knew it, I was the mistress of His Majesty the King. I could, and I would, and I did. Would you call that prostitution? Well, you can call it what you like. Truth to tell, it was nothing less than real love. The man I devoted the rest of my life to took me to his heart, and I took him to mine. He may have been England's Charles II, but he was my Charles III. Mine, I was a bold, merry slut. I was Charles's court jester. Odds codfish, Nellie, that's a bit ripe. Well, as long as I could make him laugh, as long as I could tell him a few home truths, and it wouldn't make him cut off my head, all was very, very happy in the Restoration cause. I didn't need wealth, though. I was partial to a bit of silver. I didn't need titles, though Duchess would have been nice. I didn't even need Charles's loyalty. He could have had all the whores in England. And he did. And France too, come to think of it. What a bold, merry king! Did you ever know a ruler so blatantly flaunt his whores? Not that I gave a tuppenny fig. All those mistresses just made me laugh. Like the time I knew he was visiting Moll Davis. She was another actress, though she sang like a foghorn. So on the night in question, I invited her to supper first. I mixed the highly purgative jalap weed in her collation of sweetmeats, and lo, she was on the trot to the chamber pot all night long, and the profuse looseness of her delivery incapacitated the poor mistress for the night's planned activities. Then there was his Roman whore, Hortense Mancini. She drove her husband mad, she did, with jealous paranoia. So mad was he in the end that he thought he was a tulip. So he had himself planted in the garden, and he ordered the servants to pour water over his head. And then there was his mistress, Lady Barbara Castlemaine. Tears and tantrums and jealous fits. And she was a nymphomaniac too. She bedded a highwayman, an actor, my Charlie Hart, thank you very much, a bigamist, and a rope dancer. The acrobatical posturings he could sustain for an hour or two could bring quite a tear to the eye. What's more, when the mummified body of Bishop... I'm not sure I should tell you this. When the mummified body of Bishop Braybrook toppled from its tomb during the Great Fire, she bit off its prick. Now that's what I call religious devotion. On the subject of which, we shouldn't forget his poor wife, Catherine de Braganza. The Bat, he called her, on account of her dumpy little figure and the projection of her upper lip from a protuberant front tooth. Barren as a button she was, and not at all jealous. Charlie couldn't truck jealousy. He loved variety and adventure, and a touch of the exotic in his women, like that right royal French bit, Louise Renée de Benecourt de Carwell. Mrs. Carwell they called her, because they couldn't fathom the French. Me, I had a lexicon of names for the French apple tart. Squintabella, on account of her squiffy eye. Mrs. Cartwheel, on account of the stupid huge French hats she wore, and the Weeping Willow, because odds codfish, that madame loved to weep. When the Chevalier de Rouen died, Squintabella went into deepest mourning. She tore her black handkerchief and she wrung her white hands. She didn't even know him. She just wanted to make out she was more connected than she was. So the next morning, I appear in deepest, darkest mourning. Eyes are weeping, hands are wringing. He's gone, he's gone, the poor Cham of Tartary. The Cham of Tartary? He didn't even exist. Every time Squintabella found some far-flung relative to wail over, I found some further-flung noble to drown out her wailing. She wept for the regent of Pee-Pee, I wept for the Boog of Orinoco. In the end I said, look, Squintabella, let's divide the world between us. You take the kings of the north, I'll take the kings of the south. That way we can save the world from drowning in our tears. She didn't like that. Nor did she like my infamous cussing. Even when I was dressed in all my finery, driving around in my carriage, with my own coat of arms, I still swore like a cavalier. Squintabella thought she could get her own back on me by calling me a whore. If me thought me was one bad woman, me would cut mine own throat. Then do it, love, and put us all out of our misery. In other words, fuck off. Louder we swore than plundering dragoons. Splud followed splud and zoons followed zoons. When to the king I bid good morrow, with tongue in mouth and hand on task. Carwell can rent her quim for sorrow, Castlemaine can kiss my arse. Castlemaine can kiss my arse. Calling me a whore is a frightful farce. Some say they won't, but they will if they want. You say you can and I say you can't. As if I hadn't been called a whore before. Oh, that's all the public cared about was our sexual proclivity. What is an actress but a veritable sluice gate? Even poor Annie Bracegirdle, pure as the driven snow. All they could do was debate her frigidity. Mind you, she was canny. She specialised in playing roles where she had her virgin innocence brutally ripped from her. That way everyone was happy. They got to see her in all her sexual ravagings and she got to play all the juicy parts. She played Portia, she played Flora, she played Venus. I could have done Venus. I could have done Ophelia. I pray you, love, remember. Good night, sweet ladies. Sweet ladies, good night. If I wasn't constantly cast as the comic Tom Rig mistress, I could have been good in tragedy. Don't you think, Mr. Pepys? To the king's house to see the Indian emperor, where I find Nell come again, which I am glad of. Carry Montezuma's daughter to her father's halls of gold. Sideria shall do murder, then she'll lose her lover bold. But most infinitely displeased with her playing of the emperor's daughter. A great and serious part she do most basely, just like a mad girl or a changeling. Though in comedy beyond imitation almost. Mad girl. Mad. I'll give you mad, Mr. Pepys. I'll show you. Can curses pierce the clouds and enter heaven? Why then give way, dull clouds, to my quick curses? If not by war, by surfeit, die your king, as ours by murder to make him a king. Edward thy son, that now is Prince of Wales, for Edward our son, who was Prince of Wales, die in his youth by like untimely violence. Thyself a queen, for me who was a queen, outlive thy glory like my wretched self. Stay, dog, for thou shalt hear me, thou elvish marked, abortive, rooting hog, thou slander of thy mother's heavy womb, thou loathed issue of thy father's loins, thou rag of honour, thou detested critics. Windfuckers all. The critics said that I was base in tragedy because I tried to be truthful. If you didn't make as many fancy gestures as a Freemason or Thomas Betterton, Lord, there were nights you could smell his armpits halfway down Pall Mall the way he wafted his arms around. Oh, but of course that was being tragical. Carry Montezuma's daughter to her father's halls of gold. I was complimented on my Indian emperor's daughter's accent, mind you, though it was nothing like an Aztec's. The Aztec accent was as false as the London accent. Yeah, I dare say you could tell. Me, from London, no. The London accent was as false as a merkin. Well, you know what a merkin is? It's a wig for your fanny. No, not your American fanny, your English fanny. Oh, I was born in Oxford, probably, or Hereford, maybe, on February the 2nd, 1650, at 6 o'clock in the morning. I've got my horoscope to prove it, if you believe it's real. Not even my mother would know. My dear old mum, poor Mrs. Gwynne. Grub Street liked to paint her as a hippopotamium pipe-smoking clown. The Queen Mother, they called her in the taverns, and she was a stranger to reality at times. She fell into a ditch near the neat houses one day and drowned. Poor old mum. She is dead and gone, the lady. She is dead and gone. At her head, a grass-green turf. At her heels, a stone. So, am I acting now or not? You know, I did some of my best acting in real life, where I could be tragical or comical at the toss of a coin. They didn't like me in tragedy, but because they preferred I made them laugh. Little did they know about my deep bouts of depression. It's funny, we actors understand more about the flitting by of life as we play all these different characters, the changing of fate, the winds of destiny, better than many. Odds codfish, here's me getting all maudlin. None of that around my Charlie 3. He wasn't a great one for tragedy, was Charlie, what with him being affable and easy, and he loved it to be made so by all around him. Which is why he loved me, I suppose. I knew that the art of keeping him long was the being easy and the making everything easy to him. I never meddled with his politic, only with his prick. I was a sleeping partner on Charlie's ship estate. The only piece of political advice I ever gave him: lock up your codpiece. They say I was the only one that made him jealous, but I was born under Venus. I was loyal. Besides, why would I want anybody else? I was mistress to the most charming, kind, handsome man in the whole world. Poor, sweet, impotent foot. Oh yes, impotent. Probably due to the mercury he took for curing his venereals. Oh, but the nights we used to try and hoist his sail and climb his rigging. Just to get him up was like an exercise from Hero of Alexandra's hydraulics. It was like being footed by a snail. I used to lie in wait in a sort of mental antechamber for the king to arrive, and there was a lot of him to arrive, I can tell you. Not that he didn't serve his time, mind you. I had my Charles IV Jr. as proof of that, and my little James, God bless his soul. In fact, I don't know what his problem was. No kids in marriage and 12 of the little bastards outside of it. As Lord Buckingham once said, a king is supposed to be the father to his people, and Charles was certainly the father of a great many of his. Odds codfish. Oh, odds codfish. Drawn together we were by the theatre, and we both knew our love was unique. Well, it was him that taught me how to strum these strings. Never before had an English king made someone like me his equal. Orange wench, a social outcast with nor wealth, nor heritage, nor proper education. I knew he couldn't make me an aristocrat. How could an orange girl become a duchess? Would have been effrontery of your right, royal order. He remembered me on his deathbed though, did Charlie? Shame for me, I couldn't be with him at the end. It's very sad about that. But rules is rules, only physicians, priests and family at a dying monarch's side. Took a long time for him to die as well. He's very apologetic about that. He thought that he was causing everyone a lot of trouble. Do you know what his last words were? Let not poor Nellie starve. Bless him. Oh, what's it all about in the end anyway? We're all on our own. I was dead within 2 years, paralysed by a stroke, brought on by a terrible grief. When I was no longer needed as Charles's court jester, I suppose that's when the real tragedy began. But it's all theatre anyway, isn't it? Prologues and epilogues. It's odd for me that people remember me as the cheeky little orange wench who became the king's saucy mistress. They don't remember much about the bit in between, the theatre. And yet if it hadn't been for the theatre, there wouldn't have been a pit for me to sell the fruit in. And if it wasn't for the theatre, my Charlie 3 would never have seen me. And if it wasn't for my Charlie 3, of course, I wouldn't be here on a stage in the first place, or harping on about it 350 years later, because nobody would give a toss. As if they do anyway. I'm just a seller of oranges and a flaunter of paps. What is an actress but the people's whore? Not that my paps aren't worth flaunting. John Dryden knew that. Roguey old rogue. Thanks to him, I played the tragedies. Tyrannic love. He wrote that specially for me. I got to play what I wanted to play, and they got to see what they wanted to see. Go bind her hand and foot beneath a wheel. 4 of you turn the dreadful engine round. 4 others hold her fastened to the ground, that by degrees her tender breast may feel the first rough grazings of the pointed steel. Her paps then let the bearded tenter stake, and on each hook a gory gibbet take, till the upper flesh by piecemeal torn away, her beating heart shall to the sun display. Oi, are you mad, damn confounded dog? I am to rise to speak the epilogue. I come, kind gentlemen, strange news to tell ye. I am the ghost of poor departed Nelly. Sweet ladies, don't be frightened, I'll be civil. I'm what I was in life, a harmless little devil. For after death, we sprites have just such natures we had for all the world as human creatures. And therefore I, that was an actress here, now play my tricks in hell, a demon there. Here Nelly lies, though a whore she lived above, yet died a maid in tyrannic love. I pray you, love, remember. Good night, sweet ladies, sweet ladies.